I found strange pills in my wife's bag while looking for my missing phone charger. Not the usual headache medicine or vitamins she kept around. These were different, small white tablets in an unmarked blister pack, hidden beneath receipts and makeup. Next to them sat an expensive bottle of something I'd never seen before. My hands went still as I stared at the evidence. Serena had left for work 20 minutes earlier, humming some tune I didn't recognize. She'd been doing that a lot lately. Humming, glowing, acting like she had some wonderful secret. I thought it was just a good mood at work. Now I understood it was something else entirely. The pills looked like the kind men take when they need extra help in certain departments. The bottle was sleek, professional, the sort of thing that costs more than my weekly grocery budget. Neither belonged to us. Neither had any reason to be in my wife's personal bag unless she was sharing them with someone who wasn't me. I carefully put everything back exactly where I'd found it and went to make coffee with hands that barely shook. 8 years of marriage, and this was how I discovered my wife's betrayal. Not through some dramatic confrontation or suspicious phone call, but while searching for a stupid phone charger in our kitchen on a Tuesday morning that started like any other day in Newport, Oregon. The strange thing about discovering your wife's affair isn't the anger you'd expect. At least, it wasn't for me. I stood in our kitchen, watching the coffee drip into the pot, and felt this cold, clear calm settle over my mind. It was the same feeling I got when a customer brought me a broken drone and I had to figure out exactly which component had failed. Problem identified. Now came the diagnosis phase. I'm Damon Locke, and I fix things for a living. Electronics, mostly phones, computers, the occasional surveillance drone for local businesses. I run a small repair shop in Newport, Oregon, where everybody knows everybody and secrets travel faster than our unreliable internet. At 36, I've learned that most problems have solutions if you're patient enough to find them. People think I'm quiet, maybe a little boring. They see me as the guy who fixes their gadgets without asking questions. The reliable husband who pays the bills on time and never causes drama at neighborhood barbecues. They don't realize that fixing broken things has taught me how to break working things too. And sometimes, when something is damaged beyond repair, the best solution is controlled demolition. The coffee finished brewing, and I poured myself a cup while my mind shifted into troubleshooting mode. This marriage had been showing symptoms for months. I just hadn't recognized them as system failures until now. Serena came home that evening practically glowing. She kissed my forehead like always, asked about my day like always, and started making dinner while telling me about office drama like always. Except nothing felt like always anymore. Every gesture seemed calculated now. Every smile felt like performance. She'd always been the charismatic one in our marriage. The marketing professional who could sell ice to polar bears while I quietly fixed the technical problems that kept our small-town world running. But tonight, I watched her move around our kitchen and saw something different. The way she checked her phone every few minutes. The way she hummed under her breath. The way she mentioned, oh so casually, that she might need to work late tomorrow on some big project with the sales team. You know how these deadline crunches go, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I nodded and made appropriate husband sounds while mentally cataloging every detail. The sales team. That would include Colton Vega, the flashy guy who drove the expensive truck and thought his gym membership made him irresistible. I'd met him at company parties. The kind of man who spoke too loudly and stood too close to other men's wives. The kind who probably thought quiet husbands were easy targets for this sort of thing. His confidence was about to become his biggest weakness. Living in Newport means privacy is mostly an illusion. Our town sits on the Oregon coast where the Pacific fog rolls into mix with small-town gossip, and both have a way of getting into everything. Serena grew up here, went to high school with half our neighbors, and her family runs the local insurance office. An affair wouldn't stay secret long, especially if she was careless about it. But that also meant I had advantages. I knew where people went when they wanted privacy. I knew who talked and who kept secrets. Most importantly, I knew that in a town this size, lies eventually surface like driftwood after a storm. That night, while Serena slept beside me making those little contented sounds that used to make me smile, I stared at the ceiling and planned my approach. I could confront her directly, but that would just make her better at hiding things. I could hire a private investigator, but Newport's only licensed PI was Serena's second cousin. Instead, I decided to do what I do best, methodically gather data until I had a complete picture of the system failure. In electronics, rushing the diagnostic phase always leads to incomplete repairs. The same principle would apply here. Time and patience would reveal everything I needed to know about the scope of this betrayal and the best way to respond to it. My electronics repair background taught me something most people never learn. Problems always leave traces if you know how to look for them. A blown capacitor leaves scorch marks. A corrupted hard drive makes specific sounds. A cheating wife changes her patterns in measurable ways. Over the next few days, I started documenting everything with the same systematic approach I used for complex repairs. Serena's new schedule, logged in a spreadsheet. Her phone habits, noted with timestamps. The mileage on her car, recorded each morning. Her mood patterns, tracked like voltage fluctuations. What I found confirmed my suspicions. 3 late work sessions in 2 weeks, each on days when Colton had posted gym selfies with timestamps that didn't match business hours. Serena's car showing extra miles that couldn't be explained by her usual routes. Text messages that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. She was being sloppy, probably because she thought I was too boring to notice. The same mistake people make when they bring me obviously water-damaged phones and claim they just stopped working. They underestimate the quiet guy who pays attention to details. Every pattern told a story, and I was becoming fluent in reading the signs of deception that had been there all along. My workshop takes up half our garage, a cluttered space filled with broken electronics, testing equipment, and the accumulated detritus of a decade spent fixing other people's problems. It's where I go to think, surrounded by the tools that help me solve puzzles that matter. That Saturday morning, while Serena slept in after another exhausting week, I sat at my workbench staring at a disassembled phone and thinking about evidence. The pills and bottle in her bag were just the beginning. I needed comprehensive documentation before taking any action. From my parts inventory, I selected a tiny GPS tracker, the kind I use to help customers find lost drones. Smaller than a quarter, battery life of 2 weeks, completely undetectable when properly installed. I'd hidden dozens of these in electronics over the years, always with the owner's permission, of course. Today would be slightly different. The tracker went into Serena's purse that afternoon while she showered, nestled inside a zippered compartment she never used. I also installed a small digital recorder, voice-activated, with enough memory for days of audio. If Serena was going to lie to me, I wanted to hear exactly how she did it. The beauty of good surveillance equipment is that it doesn't get emotional, doesn't make assumptions, and never lies about what it records. The beauty of electronic surveillance is its patience. Cameras don't get tired, GPS trackers don't get distracted, and voice recorders don't let emotions cloud their judgment. By Wednesday, I had a detailed map of Serena's actual activities versus her reported schedule. The late work sessions were actually visits to Ocean View Suites, a boutique hotel on the other side of town where business people went for privacy. She'd been there 3 times, always on the same days. Colton's social media showed mysterious gaps in his usual posting schedule. The voice recorder had captured even better evidence. Conversations where she laughed differently than she ever laughed with me. Phone calls where she discussed logistics with someone she called sweetheart. Most damning of all, a clear recording of her complaining to Colton about how predictable and boring I was, how I never surprised her anymore, how she felt invisible in her own marriage. Listening to that particular conversation, I decided it was time to give Serena the surprise of her lifetime. After all, she'd specifically mentioned that I never surprised her anymore. I was about to solve that problem permanently. The recording quality was crystal clear, every word documented with timestamps and GPS coordinates that would hold up in any court of law. My plan required precision, patience, and a thorough understanding of both chemistry and human psychology. Fortunately, my repair work had taught me both. Electronics fail in predictable ways, and so do people when they're caught off guard. The pills were the easy part. Using dental picks and a magnifying glass, I carefully extracted the active ingredients from each tablet. Under my workstation's bright LED lights, the process reminded me of replacing tiny surface mount components on circuit boards, delicate work that required steady hands and perfect focus. The replacement compound came from my emergency supplies, harmless but fast-acting dye tablets designed to trace water leaks in electronics cooling systems. Brilliant blue, completely safe, but impossible to wash off for several days. Each pill got refilled with the blue powder, then sealed so perfectly that even close inspection wouldn't reveal the tampering. The bottle presented a bigger challenge, but I'd dealt with sealed containers before. Heat, pressure, and patience, the same techniques that let me repair supposedly unrepairable waterproof devices. Soon I had access to the contents without damaging the packaging. Every modification was documented with photos, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence for what I'd actually done versus what people might assume. The liquid in that expensive bottle got replaced with something special from my workshop safety supplies. Years of working with electronics had taught me about chemical solutions that could reveal hidden problems. My substitute was a mixture of food-grade coloring and a mild irritant compound used to test ventilation systems. Completely safe, but intensely uncomfortable and impossible to ignore. The brilliant green dye would stain anything it touched for days. The irritant would cause immediate burning sensations and respiratory distress that would send anyone affected straight to urgent care. Most importantly, both reactions would be visible, undeniable, and require medical attention that would create permanent records. I measured every component precisely, tested the mixture on sample materials, and documented the entire process with photos. This wasn't just revenge, it was evidence collection. When Serena and Colton used my modified supplies, they'd create their own confession that no lie could explain away. I resealed the bottle so perfectly that even a laboratory analysis would have trouble detecting the tampering. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. I wasn't attacking them, just replacing their supplies with something that would reveal the truth about what they were really doing together. Thursday evening brought the performance I'd been waiting for. Serena sat across from me at dinner, twirling her pasta and building up to something. I could see it in her body language, the way she kept glancing at her phone, the practiced casualness in her voice, the slight pause before she spoke. "I need to go to Portland tomorrow for a client presentation," she said finally. "Overnight trip. Big logistics contract we're trying to land." She was good at this, I had to admit. The details felt believable, her excitement seemed genuine, and she even pulled up legitimate emails about Portland clients to show me. But the GPS tracker in her purse had already told me she'd been researching hotels in Lincoln City, nowhere near Portland. And the voice recorder had captured her real plans in a phone call that afternoon. Room service, champagne, and Colton's promise to make it worth the drive. I smiled and kissed her forehead, played the supportive husband perfectly. "Drive safe," I told her. "Text me when you get there." She promised she would, already mentally checked out of our marriage and focused on her weekend plans. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was excited about her secret getaway, having no idea it would become the most public disaster of her life. Friday morning, Serena left with an overnight bag and enough nervous energy to power my workshop. She kissed me goodbye, reminded me to eat actual meals while she was gone, and drove off humming that same mysterious tune. I watched from the window, already tracking her location on my phone as she headed toward the coast highway. She met Colton at a coffee shop in Newport. 30 minutes of surveillance footage from my strategically placed dashboard camera, showing them embracing like reunited lovers rather than coworkers grabbing a quick meeting. Then they drove in separate cars to Ocean View Suites, where Colton had reserved their usual suite under a fake name he probably thought was clever. I knew all this because I'd done my homework. Hotel reservations aren't that hard to trace when you know someone's patterns and have access to the right databases. The rest of Friday passed quietly while I waited for the show to begin. I cleaned my workshop, organized my tool collection, and prepared to document whatever came next. By Saturday afternoon, my modified supplies should have been put to their intended use. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but I'd learned patience from years of waiting for complex repairs to run their diagnostic cycles. Saturday evening brought the call I'd been expecting, though not quite in the form I'd anticipated. My phone rang at 6:47 p.m. with Serena's number, but the voice that answered was strained and barely recognizable. "Damon? Something terrible happened. We need help." The background noise told its own story. Hotel staff voices, someone crying, what sounded like emergency personnel. "What kind of help?" I asked, though I already knew. "Some kind of chemical reaction. We're at the hospital in Lincoln City. Can you come get us?" I let the pause stretch just long enough before agreeing to drive over. The emergency room was exactly what you'd expect, bright lights, antiseptic smells, and two people who looked like they'd been attacked by a paint factory. Serena sat in a wheelchair, covered head to toe in brilliant green staining that made her look radioactive. Her eyes were red and watering, her breathing labored but stable. Colton was in worse shape, hunched over in another wheelchair with his mouth and hands stained electric blue, looking like he'd been drinking antifreeze. The medical staff was bustling around them with the kind of professional confusion that comes from treating symptoms they'd never seen before. I played my part perfectly, the concerned husband rushing to help his wife after some inexplicable accident. The medical staff was professional but clearly baffled. The attending doctor explained that both patients had suffered chemical exposure that caused severe skin and mucous membrane irritation, along with the obvious staining that would take days or possibly weeks to fade completely. Any idea what they might have been exposed to? He asked me, clipboard ready. Some kind of industrial accident, maybe? I shook my head, playing the concerned husband perfectly. Serena said she was in Portland for business. I have no idea what could have caused this. The doctor made notes while Serena tried to explain, but her story kept changing. First it was a prank by hotel staff, then a cleaning chemical spill, then someone had contaminated something in their room. Each version contradicted the last, and the medical team's expressions grew more skeptical with every revision. Meanwhile, Colton sat silently, probably realizing that any explanation would require admitting what they'd been doing when the exposure occurred. The blue staining around his mouth was particularly vivid under the hospital's fluorescent lights. I took photos of everything, ostensibly to help insurance claims, but really to document the perfect visual evidence of their affair. No court in the world would believe this was anything other than intimate contact gone wrong. The drive home was 25 minutes of the most awkward silence in my marriage. Serena huddled in the passenger seat, covered by hospital blankets, but still reeking of the chemicals that had stained her green. Every few minutes, she'd start to say something, then stop, probably realizing that any explanation would dig her deeper into lies I could easily check. Colton had called his own ride. Apparently, his girlfriend was picking him up, which meant this little adventure was about to become even more complicated for everyone involved. Damon, Serena finally said as we pulled into our driveway. I can explain everything. But she couldn't, and we both knew it. How do you explain being in a hotel room with your coworker, both of you exposed to chemicals that require intimate contact to activate? How do you justify the lies about Portland when the hospital paperwork clearly showed Lincoln City? How do you account for being found in a state that could only result from activities no business meeting would ever require? I helped her into the house, got her settled in the guest bathroom where the green staining wouldn't contaminate our regular shower, and waited to see what creative fiction she'd try next. The silence between us was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Truth has a weight that lies can never match. Sunday morning brought reporters. Not major news outlets, just local bloggers and the woman who runs Newport's most popular social media page. Apparently, someone at the hospital had shared photos of the chemical incident victims, and small-town curiosity does the rest. By 10 a.m., our front yard had become an impromptu press conference, with Serena hiding upstairs and me playing the confused, concerned husband for anyone with a camera. We're just grateful everyone's okay, I told the News Times reporter. Serena's resting comfortably, and the doctors say the effects should fade in a few days. What I didn't mention was that I'd already uploaded carefully edited security footage to several anonymous social media accounts. Nothing that showed private moments, just the public parts, Serena and Colton meeting at the coffee shop, embracing like lovers, driving together to a hotel that definitely wasn't in Portland. The timestamps were clear, the vehicle license plates were visible, and the green and blue staining when they emerged hours later told its own story about what had happened inside. The comments were already pouring in from people who recognized both vehicles and were connecting dots faster than any detective could have managed. Small towns excel at collaborative gossip when given enough visual evidence to work with. By Monday, the story had taken on a life of its own. Chemical Romance Gone Wrong was trending on local social media, complete with memes featuring Serena's green-stained hospital photos and speculation about what industrial process could cause such specific discoloration. The comments section was brutal but creative, people suggesting everything from alien encounters to secret government experiments. But the locals knew better. In a town like Newport, everyone recognizes everyone else's cars, and Colton's distinctive lifted truck had been spotted at Ocean View Suites multiple times over the past month. The hotel staff, eager to distance themselves from liability, had been very cooperative with anyone asking questions about the incident. They'd confirmed that Mr. Vega had been a regular guest, always accompanied by the same woman, always paying cash for their finest suite. The woman who definitely wasn't his publicly known girlfriend, and who definitely wasn't on any business trip to Portland. Social media put the pieces together faster than any private investigator could have managed. The viral spread was beautiful to watch, each share adding another layer of public humiliation that no amount of damage control could contain. My plan was working better than I'd ever imagined possible. Tuesday brought corporate consequences. Serena's company had strict policies about workplace relationships, especially between supervisors and subordinates. When HR received anonymous tips about the hospital incident, complete with photo evidence and timeline documentation, they launched an immediate investigation. Colton was suspended pending review, standard procedure when an employee's personal conduct might affect the company's reputation. Serena was called into a closed-door meeting that lasted 3 hours and ended with her cleaning out her desk. The official reason was restructuring, but everyone knew the real cause. Small companies can't afford the liability risks that come with obvious affairs between management and staff, especially when those affairs become public scandals involving hospital visits and social media mockery. I watched from my shop as Serena carried her personal items to the car, still faintly green around the edges, her professional reputation as destroyed as her skin tone. She'd built her career on charisma and client relationships. Both were now toxic assets that no local business would want to inherit. The speed of her professional downfall was almost impressive. 8 years of building credibility destroyed in less than a week of viral humiliation. Corporate policies exist for exactly these situations, and HR departments don't mess around when the evidence is this clear. The divorce papers were filed Wednesday morning, exactly 5 days after the hospital incident. My lawyer, Frank Wilson, had been preparing them since Saturday, working through the weekend to ensure everything was legally bulletproof. "This is the strongest infidelity case I've seen in 20 years of practice," he told me, spreading the evidence across his conference table. GPS tracking data, voice recordings, photographic documentation, hospital records, and multiple witness statements. She can't contest any of it. Oregon's divorce laws favor the innocent party in cases of proven adultery, especially when the cheating spouse has been deceptive about finances and employment status. Serena's lawyer would have an impossible job trying to argue against evidence this comprehensive. The most damaging piece wasn't even the hotel records or the surveillance footage. It was her own recorded voice, captured by my hidden device, discussing how to hide assets and manipulate the eventual divorce proceedings to her advantage. She basically created a confession tape of premeditated fraud, thinking she was just venting to her lover about her boring husband. Frank estimated we could have everything wrapped up in 60 days with a settlement heavily favoring my position. The evidence was so overwhelming that fighting it would only increase her legal costs while guaranteeing the same outcome. Thursday evening, Serena finally tried to have the conversation she'd been avoiding all week. The green staining had faded to a sickly yellow-brown that somehow made her look even worse, and her voice was still hoarse from the chemical irritation. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, hands folded like a child called to the principal's office. "I know you have questions," she said carefully. "About what happened at the hotel, about Colton, about everything." I let her talk, recording every word on the phone app I'd activated before sitting down. She tried several approaches, claiming it was just a one-time mistake, insisting Colton had pressured her into it, suggesting we could go to counseling and work things out. Each explanation contradicted the evidence I'd already gathered, and she knew it. The GPS data showed months of deception. The voice recordings revealed detailed planning and mockery of our marriage. The financial records I'd pulled showed she'd been hiding money in preparation for leaving me. When she finally realized I wasn't going to play the role of devastated husband begging for reconciliation, her tone changed completely. The mask slipped, and I saw the calculation underneath. She was already figuring out damage control strategies, not actually feeling remorse for what she'd done to our marriage. "You did this," she said, her voice carrying the first hint of real emotion I'd heard all week. "Somehow you sabotaged that bottle, didn't you? This whole thing was planned." I looked at my wife of 8 years, this woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my trust, and felt nothing but clinical satisfaction. "Serena, if I'd known you were cheating, I would have just filed for divorce. Why would I risk a felony assault charge when I could just hire Frank Wilson and be done with it?" The logic was unassailable, and she knew it. Any accusation she made would require admitting what she and Colton had been doing when the exposure occurred. No prosecutor would touch a case where the complainant had to confess to adultery just to explain how they'd been victimized. She was trapped by her own lies, caught in a web of evidence that grew stronger every time she tried to escape it. "The papers are already filed," I told her gently. "Frank says we can have this wrapped up in 60 days if you don't contest it. Given the evidence we have, I'd recommend cooperation." Her face went through several expressions before settling on defeated resignation. She'd played a game she didn't understand against an opponent she'd completely underestimated. The quiet, boring husband had just checkmated her with moves she never saw coming. Friday brought the final piece of public humiliation, Colton's very public breakup with his longtime girlfriend. She'd apparently been following the social media drama all week, putting together the same timeline that everyone else in town had figured out. Their confrontation happened in the parking lot of the gym where Colton spent most of his free time, witnessed by about 30 people with camera phones. The resulting video went viral locally within hours, a furious woman screaming at a blue-stained man who kept trying to explain that it wasn't what it looked like. "Then what was it?" she shouted, loud enough for the entire strip mall to hear. "What business meeting leaves you looking like a smurf and ends with hospital visits?" Colton's attempts to control the narrative were pathetic. He claimed food poisoning, allergic reactions, industrial accidents, anything except the truth that everyone already knew. By that evening, he'd lost his job, his girlfriend, his gym membership, and most of his social circle. The blue staining would fade eventually, but his reputation in Newport was permanently damaged. I watched the breakup video from my shop, surrounded by customers who were all talking about the scandal that had consumed our small town for a week. The consensus was clear. Colton had gotten exactly what he deserved. Saturday morning, I opened my shop like always and found a line of customers waiting outside. Not for repairs, just to talk, to get the inside story, to offer congratulations on handling the situation like a real man. Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop brought me coffee and a homemade muffin. "That wife of yours never deserved you," she declared loudly enough for half the street to hear. Too good for this town, she always thought. Well, look at her now, the whole county's laughing. The general consensus seemed to be that I'd been the victim of a terrible betrayal, and that whatever had happened to Serena and Colton was simply karma working its magic. Nobody suspected I'd had anything to do with their chemical mishap. Why would they? I was just the quiet electronics guy who fixed their phones and minded his own business. The idea that boring, predictable Damon Locke could engineer such a precise and devastating revenge was beyond their imagination, which was exactly how I'd planned it. People see what they expect to see, and they expected the wronged husband to be a victim, not an architect of justice. The sympathy and support felt better than any revenge could have, because it came with the satisfaction of knowing I'd earned it through careful planning rather than lucky circumstances. The house felt different now, bigger, cleaner, more peaceful. Serena had moved out the previous weekend, taking only what the temporary custody order allowed, leaving behind 8 years of shared memories and accumulated resentment. I'd thrown away everything that reminded me of her betrayal, donated clothes that still held her scent, and slowly reclaimed spaces that had felt poisoned by deception. The guest room where she'd hidden during her green phase became my expanded workshop. The kitchen table where she'd lied to me over dinner was replaced with a smaller version that seated one comfortably. Most satisfying of all, I'd changed the locks, updated the security system, and installed new surveillance cameras that would make sure I never had to wonder about betrayal again. The settlement negotiations were proceeding exactly as Frank had predicted. Serena's lawyer was pushing for the fastest possible resolution, knowing that any trial would just provide more opportunities for public humiliation. She'd already lost her job, her reputation, and most of her friends. Dragging things out in court would only make her situation worse while costing her money she could no longer afford to spend. The house had become a sanctuary again instead of a crime scene, filled with my projects and interests instead of lies and deception. 3 weeks later, the green and blue staining had finally faded, but the social damage was permanent. Serena had tried to attend her cousin's wedding and been quietly asked to leave when other guests began whispering and pointing. Colton had moved to Portland, presumably to start over somewhere his reputation hadn't preceded him. Their affair, which had seemed so exciting and dangerous when it was secret, had become the cautionary tale that parents used to teach their children about consequences and small-town justice. I'd become something of a local legend, not as the man who'd engineered their downfall, but as the wronged husband who'd handled the betrayal with dignity and strength. People brought me their electronics problems and stayed to share gossip, advice, and homemade food. My business was booming, my stress levels had plummeted, and I slept better than I had in months. The divorce would be final next week, giving me complete ownership of everything we'd built together plus substantial damages for her infidelity and deception. Frank had negotiated a settlement that left Serena with barely enough to start over in a new town, while I kept the house, the business, the savings, and most importantly, my reputation intact. Justice had been served with the precision of a well-executed repair job. Sunday morning, I sat on my front porch with coffee and the newspaper, watching Newport wake up around me. The Pacific fog was burning off early, promising a beautiful day for the coast. My phone was silent. No lies to decode, no schedules to verify, no hidden meanings to unravel. Just peace, quiet, and the satisfaction of a problem permanently solved. A car drove past with teenagers heading to the beach, windows down, music playing. One of them pointed at my house and said something that made the others laugh. Probably sharing the story of the woman who'd gotten herself stained green by cheating on the electronics guy. I waved back, enjoying my role as a local celebrity. The quiet man who'd proven that sometimes patience and precision were more powerful than anger and confrontation. The morning mail brought the final divorce decree, signed and sealed, making official what everyone in town already knew. Justice had been served, and it had been served cold, calculated, and completely legal. I finished my coffee, picked up my newspaper, and went inside to plan my day. After all, I had a business to run and a reputation to maintain as the man who fixed things properly the first time.